Okay, so I've got to ask, in the Enterprise debriefing or conference room, we saw the models depicting the evolution of the Enterprises. Yes, of course, they had no NX-01, and they did use the Andrew Probert Ambassador class model. But can you think of an in-universe reason why this model might have been a classic Excelsior design rather than your design? If indeed this wall was meant to represent the different enterprises of history. We at Trekyards like to think that that wall was merely the prototype wall.
True. Well, a lot of this stuff came out of the art department, and so Herman would do the sets, or be the overall designer of the sets. He'd have set designer design, and Mike Kakuda would jump in to do the graphics and stuff, and then the set designer. We were all in the same room, and so this actually happened before I was there. But the way the process would work is probably Mike and Rick Sternbach were probably behind that entire wall, and they probably, let's do this, let's use this, let's put the Excelsior in there. And it probably wasn't meant to be a full Enterprise line, but they probably assumed that would be a good ship because they had a design for it. It was a canon idea. So I think they were probably reaching when they put that Excelsior in there, and they might have been the reason it was the Excelsior that was the retrofit. And so
So
that's why.
predestination paradox, as it was.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of future things came out of those early ideas, and having Mike and Rick there was just genius because they know the shows backwards and forwards, and it's a great passion for them. And so I'm sure that they probably determined that future without even knowing it, and that's why it's the classic Excelsior, not the B, and it was already established. And so to make something like that on the wall is a big deal. So so they stuck with it.
Yeah. So one of the big changes, as you say, between the original and the refit, see, guess which one is which, is that the addition of the new impulse engines and actually longer warp engines. So when you were designing this in the universe of Star Trek, how much faster, maneuverable would you think your refit be over the classic Excelsior and even over the original Connie refit? How much stronger, better, faster? How much of an improvement was your refit, do you think, to the original version?
The one point of thought I thought when I saw the Excelsior is it shaped just from that one point of view. You'd see it in the space dock, and when its engines go out, it looked frumpy from that point of view. From the side, it's extremely sleek, but you don't see it from that point of view. And that was the reference I had at the time. And I thought, look, I'm a huge fan of aviation and going out to Edwards Air Force Base, looking at all the X-planes and stuff. All the fastest jets had fins on them, so I thought that the more fins I can put on it, the faster it's going to look. And so that's why on the rear of the nacelle you got fins all over the back as opposed to anywhere else. And like I said, at that time I had only seen that view of the Excelsior from the motion picture or the third movie. And so when we got the models, like, oh my gosh, it's super sleek already without having to add that stuff. But it was done at the time to kind of make it look like it's a little bit more faster, a little bit more powerful ship. And just by accident, putting this architecture on the bottom, it kind of lended itself to looking a little bit more faster as well.
So, but in general, how much of an improvement do you think your design was in canon? Was this really the next generation of warship, or just a slight improvement?
Just a slight improvement. I didn't want to alter what Bill had done originally because it was so beautiful, and I didn't want to take it into a whole new world. I wanted to keep the lineage alive and just enhance it as opposed to change it. And so that was my point of view. And especially when you look at other ships, especially the Matt Jeffrey stuff that we do for Enterprise and stuff, we'd have this opportunity to redo the Tholians and the Klingons and stuff. And you don't want to take it too far from the original. You want to keep the homage there. And so it was the same with the Excelsior turning into the B. I didn't want to alter it to the point where it was 100% different, but just enough that it was more of a retrofit.
It is fair to say, though, it's much faster, much more maneuverable, because that's a lot of extra engine power you've added to the back in terms of impulse. I mean, that's over doubling it, you'd think. So.
Now, you've already mentioned that the protrusions on the secondary hull would avoid damaging the actual model when the Nexus energy ribbon hit the ship and killed Kirk. But this, in fact, didn't work because I've heard that the glue they used to attach those protrusions did, in fact, damage the original Excelsior model. As a fellow model builder, I'm just curious as to what kind of glue you use for those kind of model modifications. And for that matter, what materials were used in creating the actual filming models of the ships?
A lot of stuff is fiberglass base. It has like a gel coat, which is a plastic layer. And then they do a fiberglass to keep the shape. And then they do an internal structure of aluminum or metal to keep the shape. Then the lighting goes inside. On the exterior for detail, you'll use anything from a body filter like Bondo to dental acrylic, all kinds of material. You use a version of hot or super glue called cyanoacrylate, and it's an extremely tough glue, especially back then. It's changed, the form has changed, but back then it was like concrete. And the trouble with this particular edition is it had to feather into the body. It couldn't be a segmented piece. And so there you got to use a filler. So it's a big gamble that it would not come off without damaging the ship. And from ILM's point of view, they had to do it. And then I think, like you said, when they tried to take it off later, it was there's no way to do it. So, so you got battle damage without having planned battle damage when you pull a piece off. But it's just a material you can't get around adding something to a beautiful piece without destroying it. And of course, you got to sand that area smooth for the glue to adhere. So, and the materials. So you had two versions of it. You had the clean version, and they built a giant section just to that front section where they could put the brass edge in and give you the more detail and add the little optical element of them standing there looking out in space. So a lot of times it would determine what the shot was, what the size was going to be. And it was the same with the Enterprise A. Before it was the A in Wrath of Khan, they did close-up details of the areas for the patches and stuff.
So was the Excelsior model like irreparably damaged because of that, or did they actually restore the Excelsior model back to its original?
As far as I know, it stayed that way. I couldn't tell you for sure. I'd have to look at the. I think it sold as the B, not the Excelsior. And I think there was only one.
I think it sold as a Lakota, actually. I think it was still that by the time it was done.
Yeah. So, I think the Lakota had been done because I went and photographed that model, and I think it was before it became the B. So.
Yeah. So this is a hard question, but could be amazing. So if you could go back in time, John, and you had no money restrictions, I'm talking billions of dollars for your company, is there anything you do different with the design apart from make it solid gold and platinum? Perhaps if it was all CG, is there anything you could think in retrospect that would have been cool if you had done to really make it, a more unique ship? Again, budget, no problem.
When you look at the Excelsior compared to the Enterprise, the original Enterprise lineage, it is very different architecturally. It's meant to be a different ship. And what they did with the C is they kind of did the C actually came after the Enterprise D, and what Rick and Mike did is they did a morph of the D and the A. And so that's where that came from. So most likely it would follow that kind of idea for a B. And they're all drawn out of order or designed out of order. So you'd have like a future ship to use as a bearing of where the architecture is going and kind of do something in the middle. But I hadn't thought about doing a different ship. That probably would be the direction. Okay, we need to do something in the middle that lines things up, which would be kind of fun to do. But
Okay.
it was the chosen Excelsior. That's where he went. But as you can tell when you line them all up, it's the only one that has a completely different kind of.
But is there anything you would have done? Is there anything you would have done to the B model though to make it, if you had again no budget restraints? So if you had to keep the Excelsior, is there anything you would have done differently to the model to make it a bit more interesting?
Probably not.
Good answer.
Can't think of anywhere I'd go with it because
yeah,
there you go.
Good.
Maybe more fins like the ones on the saucer section.
The saucer on the front.
Now, are there any other stories or behind-the-scenes things you can think of about designing the Enterprise B or altering the Excelsior model or shooting or anything? We love little tidbits like that. So, any interesting stories?
I was working on the phone with primarily Bill George at the time, and he was kind of supervising this. John Goodson was kind of in the model shop. He and I became a bit closer work-wise friends as First Contact came again, but I was always a fan of Bill George. I remember I'd read about him, and the very first Cinefex that hit Phoenix was number 13. I want to say 13. It was The Return of the Jedi, and he was like in every other picture. So he was like the model king at the time, and so he was kind of a hero. And to hear that he was behind the Excelsior and going to be part of the retrofit, it was a great treat to meet him. And so I'd send the drawings over, and he'd go, "Okay, this will be cool. We can do this. We can do that." So him and John would add their own stuff, like on the top of the transwarp unit. That's the impulse engine. There's 4 little kind of inset details. That was something that they came up with, and so there you go. So that was one of their little additions. So as I was saying, when I get these projects, I don't want to do a full 100% perfect drawing because I want the next guy to be able to add his creativity and not be locked into something where they're kind of not allowed to do that. And working in the model shop, we were always kind of forced to follow those drawings, and you go, it'd be cool if we did this or did that, but you could never do it. And so I always wanted to leave that door open as far as collaboration goes. And they're just brilliant what these guys did. That's all I can say.
Cool. So last of all, John, each enterprise has made its mark in history. Maybe the B and C a little bit less because they were on the show so briefly. And we never got to explore their full potential. So we know from the Star Trek TNG technical manual, the Enterprise B was a ship of exploration and charted 142 different star systems, which is awesome. And it made contact with 17 different species. First contact, which is again really good. What was your personal take on what you hoped for the Enterprise B going forward? In terms of what happened in its lifetime. Is there any story you would love to have seen with Enterprise B? And of course, how did you feel, knowing that this ship was indeed the one that killed the legend of James T. Kirk?
Exactly. Well, you always wanted the grandeur of the original series was they did a lot of episodes were exploring, and they'd go to these strange new places. And I always wanted to see our ships do that. We've kind of gotten to the point where there's an ultra bad guy in every story now, and that's what guides Star Trek as opposed to that big grand, like the motion picture. I thought was just fantastic because it was an exploration thing. The bad guy was exploring this fantastic body in space, and Khan kind of set the tone for the bad guy. Ford kind of broke it with the whales and stuff, but you always had the sinister bad guy that kind of dominated where the stories would go. And I always wanted to see him in these fantastic, brilliant space backgrounds, that as opposed to just a planet or a little galaxy in the background. Nemesis was cool because you went in the nebulas and stuff, and the same with Insurrection when you were in the Briar Patch, and that was kind of the highlights for me watching it, go in these different environments.
Now, Samuel, we know that the Enterprise B did in fact discover and fight the Terror Bird. They didn't know it was a Romulan ship, though, but that's a Star Trek Originals episode.
Yeah,
we'll have to show you that one, John. We have a designer, Michael Freitas, who built an amazing Romulan design as part of the originals for the Indiegogo. We actually built a full backstory behind the ship, had a 3D model created, and then because it made sense timeline-wise, I decided let's say the Enterprise B. It was designed to face the Enterprise B, and so I've done some animations of it closing in the Enterprise B. But don't worry, your ship got some good shots and managed to survive. So don't worry, the Enterprise B lives on.
Oh, very good. And it was kind of fun with the back to the ILM story in the model shop. The scene was going to open with it being launched out of the space dock, and so they brought the space dock model over from the warehouse, and a huge crate, size of a pickup truck, and it had a panel on the side that opened up, and you could look inside, and it had a board on the bottom about 2 feet, and then this thing hinged, and you could open it. So we open that up, and we look in. And there's no model. We go, where's the space dock? It's gone. And up at the top of the box is a bolt and a bar and just a chunk of the space dock. And we're going, what the heck? Someone took the model. And then we look at the bottom of the box, and just them moving it, it was so fragile, it was just a pile, all billions of parts at the bottom of this box. And so they shipped it up to ILM, and that's why you have the smaller space dock, because it was impossible to put back together. So that's why you got the custom space dock for the Enterprise B, salvaged of scrap plastic and metal in the bottom of a box.
That's interesting to know, but I'm kind of cringing now. That's such a sad ending to that.
You should have been there.
I can imagine.
It's like that was kind of the way with all the models, because they'd store them at this warehouse called Cantera. Yeah. And they never sat in one place. They're in a box, and depending on how they were packed, they'd either survive being moved 20 times a day or they wouldn't. And many times you'd open the box, it's like, uh-oh. And so Bird of Prey was one that was always destroyed. And the Enterprise B had a board that went under the saucer and the body. And when they drop it, clink, it would kink on that point. So every time you pull it out of the box, you'd have to fix it before you could photograph it or what have you.
Well, on that negative note, crew, there you have it. An insider's look at the Enterprise B, and also a sneak peek at some of the information that we will be presenting in our Excelsior class episode. As always, it is so cool to talk to the actual designers who worked on Star Trek and hear all the backstage stories like that one and such that went into these amazing designs. If anyone had told me even a year ago that I would be here on Trekyards talking to all these great people in person, I would have told you that you were crazy.
You would have
But
been crazy.
But Samuel and I are proof positive that if you love something and you put some effort in, amazing things can happen. All that being said, thank you very much for joining us today, John. It's always an honor and a thrill to have you here, and we look forward to many more episodes with you in the future.
And a very big thank you for this episode specifically, John. Thank you.
My pleasure, and you guys are great, and I'm a fan of your stuff. So we're all great fans, and it's fun that we get to participate in that stuff. So good times.
Well, thank you. In the meantime, guys, please visit trekyards.com and check out past episodes, crew bios, and a lot of other fun stuff. Or join us on Facebook as we share starship pictures and other great ship-based discussions. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like and subscribe button to join us again very soon. This is Captain Foley, my first officer.
Commander Cockings, that's me.
And Admiral John Eaves. Until next time. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
All right, thanks, guys.